35-year-old Carla Stefaniak lived in Hollandale Beach in Miami, Florida. One of 4 siblings and born in Venezuela, she and her family had all come to the US when Carla was 19. They stayed there until she was 23 before deciding to go back. But Carla loved it in Florida and was happy to stay there alone. She got a job at an insurance agency and had no trouble making friends, so she really didn't want to go anywhere. She was a glass half full kind of person, throwing herself into everything that came her way. Always the first one to say, yeah, I'll give it a go. Her brother Mario said she was always up to something crazy as a kid. Her parents had to have eyes in the back of their head to keep up with her. Her friend Greg said she had that loud, vibrant personality in the way she dressed and talked and everything. She was just an absolutely unforgettable human being. Another friend described her as a fiery Latina who loved adventure. She was an avid traveller. Everything from going through Iceland in an RV and skiing in Switzerland to the hustle and bustle of New York City. Weekends away in Cuba, Spain and the Caribbean. She wanted to see it all. She documented every trip, sharing her adventures with the world and hoping one day to turn this passion into a full-time online job. Her brother Carlos was married to a woman named April, and Carla and April were best friends. Carlos joked that his sister talked to his wife more than he did. They were inseparable. So it seemed only fitting that as Carla's 36th birthday was approaching, she and April were going to take a trip to Costa Rica. Carla made an itinerary and planned every part of the week. No part of this beautiful place could be missed. November 22nd, 2018. Carla and April landed in Costa Rica on Thanksgiving Day. They had booked into a few hotels, and the final stop would be an Airbnb in a gated complex. Up in the mountains of Escazú, just 10 minutes from San Jose. Gorgeous views from their own balcony, security guards and a pool. It was the perfect end to a fabulous trip.
How to welcome me for my birthday!
Carla and April spent every day jumping around the beaches, eating amazing food and staying busy on social media.
Second day, the hot springs.
On November 25th, Carla posted a photo to Instagram of herself by the pool. By all accounts, the trip had been everything they had hoped for. April was booked onto a flight home a day earlier than Carla, giving her one extra night there alone. The next day would be her birthday, and as soon as she landed back in Florida, her friends were ready to take her out for dinner. At 11:30 a.m. on November 27th, Carla hugged April goodbye at the airport, and then the Uber driver offered her a city tour. She agreed, paying in cash. She spent the afternoon seeing some more sights, sending photos to her family, and treating herself to a new purse and some jewellery. The Uber driver dropped her back at her Airbnb, Villa La Mas, apartment 8. She started getting ready to go to a jazz cafe at around 6:30 p.m. But a huge tropical storm was on the way, and this had different plans. November 27th, 8 p.m. Carla was sat in the villa alone. She completed her online check-in for her flight and arranged for the Uber driver from earlier that day to pick her up the next morning at 8:30 a.m. She was going to do some shopping and grab some food before her flight. The storm was getting more fierce, branches hitting the windows and the rain hammering on the roof. It was so loud. Carla sent a message to her family WhatsApp group saying, "I want to go out but I'm dead tired." Then suddenly, everything went dark. The complex had lost power. Carla messaged the group saying it's raining hard, power went off. Super sketchy. It briefly came back on, but Carla was clearly rattled, and who wouldn't be? Intermittent power, violent weather, and no one else around in a totally unfamiliar location. She sent a message to April saying, "Okay, it's back. Creepy AF." Trying to calm down, she remembered she would be back in Florida the next day. It was just not the last night in paradise she'd been hoping for. Now running on little phone battery, Carla was also on FaceTime to a friend in New York. She told him she was thirsty and he suggested that she boil some water and drink it, but all she had was a skillet. It was far too dangerous for her to go out for anything, so she told him she was going to ask one of the security guards on site for a bottle of water. Then, at around 9 p.m, her phone died and the FaceTime ended. The next morning was her birthday, but there was still nothing from Carla. Her Facebook was quiet and every message on WhatsApp after 9 p.m. had not been read. However, with a huge storm cutting power, maybe this didn't seem that odd. She could just be frantically packing now that she could see everything again. At 8:30 a.m, the Uber driver arrived to pick her up as planned, but Carla was a no-show. April called the villa asking if Carla was there, and the security guard told her she'd left already, just after 5 a.m. with her luggage. Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport, 5:30 p.m. Carla's plane from Costa Rica had landed, and her friends were there to pick her up and take her straight out, but she never got off the plane. Sometimes there are too many red flags, and her family called the Costa Rican authorities right away. They were told to wait for 48 hours. Carla was an adult and they had to give it more time. Her family was persistent. If only they knew just how glaringly wrong this all was. The police finally agreed to send a patrol car to the villa. The Airbnb she was staying in had been left really clean, and her belongings were not there. So clean, in fact, that more tourists had already checked in, which was troubling in case something had happened in there and things were now being unknowingly tampered with. Police interviewed the cleaning team and they said that there was nothing at all out of place in the villa and it had been left really tidy. Until the 2 days had passed, the police were reluctant to do any more on this. Her family started a huge group chat of about 60 people and everyone was given a task. Some were in charge of calling the police, others contacting Airbnb, others on social media, and calling reporters. They got hold of the owner of the Airbnb, and he said after talking to the security team, it seemed that she had left at around 5 a.m. the morning of her flight. She had got into an Uber and gone with her bags. But her Uber account did not show a transaction that matched this time, and there were no security cameras on the property to verify anything. And as well as this, her family said it just didn't stack up. Her flight wasn't until 1:30 and she was only 30 minutes away from the airport. There was no reason to leave that early in the morning, especially as she had already arranged a pickup with a driver she knew. The Uber driver she made her plans with said he was only there at 8:30 a.m. He did not arrive any earlier and definitely was nowhere near the complex at 5 a.m. His story checked out. Carla's phone had been connected to the internet again for a brief moment at 12:17 a.m, about 3 hours after her FaceTime had ended. Phone data showed that her phone had not left the property though. This was the last place she had been seen. Finally, Carla's face was now in the local media and a missing persons investigation was underway. 6 days after she was last heard from, police officers arrived with dogs at the villa. There was bleach and vinegar all over it. The place had been scrubbed. They then found Carla's blood and semen on the bed and floor. If Carla was still alive, she had not left the property by choice.
Vamos a la Florida con la búsqueda desesperada de una mujer que literalmente se desvaneció.
Missing in Costa Rica. We've just learned new details about 36-year-old Carla Stefaniak. Her family says there's new evidence to support their theory that Carla was kidnapped while on vacation. Our Gabrielle Shirley on this story joining us now with the latest.
The family of Carla Stefaniak, who lived here in Tampa for about 10 years, tells us they have not heard from her since Tuesday evening. She was supposed to get on a plane and fly into Fort Lauderdale on Wednesday, but she never did. You can catch a glimpse of Carla Stefaniak's spirited personality in these videos, filmed in Costa Rica.
It says April's day, but it's like Carla's day too.
April Burton, Carla's sister-in-law, gave them to us. They took the trip together. She says she can hardly watch them.
It's just really hard because, at the end of the day, I do feel, guilty because I left earlier. So, you start doing those what ifs.
April flew home on Tuesday. Carla planned to leave Costa Rica on Wednesday. She stopped responding to April on Tuesday night.
I told her I think my flight's delayed because I had a layover in Fort Lauderdale, and she said that sucks, and then that's all I heard from her. And that was at 8:54 p.m.
April knows Carla made it to her Airbnb in San Jose, but she does not know what happened to her next.
We just know she's been abducted. There's no reason for her not to have had any contact with anyone. It's been 5 days.
Local news soon became international. A GoFundMe was set up to help her family get out there. #FindCarla was on everyone's social media. And thanks to the determination of people back home, the US Embassy started applying the same pressure on the Costa Rican government. The FBI were on board too now, and things were actually moving.
Carla's brother is currently in Costa Rica, retracing his sister's steps. He visited that Airbnb.
Went there the night before and left at 5 a.m. Everything's gone. She left with everything on hand.
The family does not know who she could have been meeting. They are now taking to social media, pushing for the United States to get involved in the search. Carla's brother tells us he bought a one-way ticket. He plans to stay in Costa Rica until he finds her.
Carlos flew to Costa Rica and went straight to the Airbnb. He met with a security guard, but he told him he couldn't help him. No one could give him any answers.
A Florida woman has disappeared during a vacation in Central America, and her family is trying desperately to find her.
Adding to the mystery, the family says Stefaniak had checked in online for her flight and ordered an Uber to pick her up later that morning. In a press conference, authorities in Costa Rica said they were investigating the disappearance. Stefaniak's brother says he has personally contacted the U.S. Embassy and local law enforcement.
Do you feel like they're doing enough right now to try to figure out what happened?
We don't know. That's totally classified. They won't release any information. Seems like it's kidnapping, but it also seems like it could be human trafficking.
At this point, I mean, we have to be realistic. There's a lot of bad outcomes that are possible. We just gotta hope for the best.
Florida Senator Marco Rubio's office has reached out to assist the family. CBS News contacted the U.S. Embassy in Costa Rica and law enforcement there, but we have yet to hear back. Airbnb had no comment. Uber says it will assist the authorities. Nora?
All right, we're thinking of her and her family. Thank you, Manuel.
It had now been over a week, and as everyone back home had been holding their breaths, checking their phones and refreshing their feeds, in Costa Rica, everyone's fears were realised. It was noon in the San Antonio de Escazo neighbourhood when sniffer dogs reacted to something in a wooded area. It was the decomposing body of a female. She was partially nude, half buried, and covered in plastic. This was about 300 metres away from the complex Carla had been staying in. Although dental records needed to be looked at, the media were already running the story, and it seemed likely that they had found Carla.
News right now, a family fearing the worst is now in Costa Rica. Authorities working to figure out if a woman with Tampa ties is the victim of a murder.
Tonight, her family posting on social media that they are asking for prayers after a woman's body was found very close to where that tourist had rented an Airbnb.
Carlos said the second he got the call, he just knew it. No confirmation was needed. He looked at the sky and cried. He could feel it was his sister.
A breaking news update to a story that has made national headlines. A Tampa Bay family's worst fears confirmed.
I will not lose too big long of my life. My mom, Carla.
Very, very sad for this family, but the father and her brothers and that family of friends say they are grateful for everyone for their support and prayers over the last couple of days. They're now working to get her body moved to Tampa so they can start funeral arrangements. Reporting live in the Satellite Center, JJ Burton, ABC, Action News.
Nearby, they found her phone, her passport, her laptop, and her suitcase. Her cause of death was a blow to the head, and she had been stabbed many times. Her arms and neck were covered in wounds, her jaw was dislocated, and her neck was broken. A forensic pathologist said the knife had gone into her back with such force she had 2 broken vertebrae. The damage to her body and the DNA under her fingernails told a story of a violent fight until her last breath. Her final moments in a remote location with no power and a storm so loud outside that any calls for help would have been lost. It was a nightmare. Police indicated that the motive appeared to be sexual, especially given the semen found at the Airbnb, but they did not publicly release detailed forensic confirmation regarding a sexual assault. It seemed that Carla had died around 10 p.m, just a couple of hours after she was going to get water from one of the security guards. Everyone in and around the apartment was interviewed over and over, and the owners of the Airbnb were said to be cooperating fully as well. They spoke to one of the security guards that looked after apartment 8, the villa she'd been renting. He even lived in the building next door. As well as being covered in fresh scratches, his differing stories immediately raised eyebrows. 32-year-old Bismarck Espinosa Martinez first said he saw Carla leave in an Uber, followed by he was asleep so didn't know anything, and hadn't seen her at all. The more they talked to him, the more he was just tying himself up in knots. The more they asked about this 5 a.m. story, the clearer it became. Everyone had heard this from Bismarck. No one else could corroborate this, neither could her Uber transactions, and the autopsy showed she was dead long before 5 a.m. Bismarck had full access to her villa, along with the other rentals and the grounds surrounding it, which would not have been accessible to the general public, and this was where she had been found. Before long, officers placed the 32-year-old under arrest. His DNA was later found to be a match to what was underneath her fingernails and everything in the villa. They also learned that Bismarck had even called his wife after killing Carla and told her what he had done. Bismarck was from Nicaragua and had been in the country since June, only a few months before this had happened. He had what police described as an irregular immigration record, meaning he was not in the country with documented legal permission. The Director General of the Judicial Investigation Police, Walter Espinosa, said, "This is a complex case and it's a difficult case. The resolution of this case is very important for the country, for the victim's family, and for society as a whole." Carlos said he couldn't believe he had stood there and shaken this man's hand, thanking him for helping them. Bismarck had been so calm. Bismarck was later charged with simple homicide, the equivalent of second-degree murder, because there was apparently not enough evidence for first-degree murder. This charge would have to show evidence of premeditation or other aggravating factors, something which the police couldn't do or say for certain.
An update on the case of an American tourist found murdered in Costa Rica while on vacation. ABC Action News reporter Michael Paluska just talking to Carla Stefaniak's brother. He joins us live in the Satellite News Center with the very latest. And Mike, this doesn't sound like good news.
Jameson, it's not good news for the family. They tell us that they are outraged because Carla Stefaniak, suspected killer at this point, has only been charged with simple homicide. And what that translates to in our legal system is just second-degree murder.
We know that this is not going to change anything, but we want this monster to be in jail for as much time as possible. What we want to do is just spread the word about what's happening in Costa Rica. Unfortunately, American authorities don't have any jurisdiction in Costa Rica, so all we can do is spread the word and try to make this new viral and put some pressure on the Costa Rican authorities to make a better job, do a better job.
As you heard them, they're hoping that Costa Rican authorities will hear their protests here in the United States and maybe change that to a first-degree murder charge. Caicedo told us the next step in all of this is to get a trial date that has not been set. We're live in the Satellite News Center tonight. Michael Paluska, ABC Action News.
As everything was unfolding, Airbnb and the complex also had to be looked at. They had not required any employee screening or background checks, and there had been no questions about his criminal history. His defense team maintained his innocence right up until the trial, speaking of a botched investigation. So finally in 2020, Bismarck was in court.
The trial is underway in Costa Rica for the man accused of killing a Florida woman on vacation.
Monday, the trial began for Bismarck Espinosa Martinez, seen here from inside a Costa Rican courtroom. But Stefaniak's family and their attorneys have reason to believe he wasn't the only one involved.
She fought really hard, according to the forensics. And we just don't believe that nobody heard or saw anything.
Prosecutors previously upgraded the charges from second-degree to first-degree murder after pressure from Stefaniak's family. If convicted, we're told Espinosa Martinez faces up to 66 years in prison.
In Costa Rica, there is no jury, so it was down to 3 judges to try, convict, and sentence him. Although his charges were upped to first-degree murder, he was ultimately acquitted of that, and instead found guilty of simple homicide. Prosecutors were now seeking the maximum penalty allowed for simple homicide, which was up to 18 years, while Carla's family argued for a much harsher sentence and additional charges such as robbery or attempted sexual assault.
The man accused of murdering Carla Stefaniak has been found guilty. This is according to Costa Rican newspaper La Nacion. Bismarck Espinoza Martinez was sentenced to 16 years in prison.
3 judges sentenced Bismarck to 16 years in prison. Carla's family launched a civil lawsuit against Airbnb and the Villa Lamas resort, where the Airbnb operated out of. The suit states in part that they negligently failed to perform any kind of background check or otherwise take any measures to determine whether Martinez was fit for the authority and power and control provided to him.
We are very hopeful that by prosecuting this action, it will force Airbnb to take greater action to protect its customers.
Their lawyer says he wasn't legally authorised to work, yet nevertheless he was given his own apartment there, on the grounds, an apartment that was coincidentally directly next door to Carla's rented villa. The harm to Stefaniak, caused by Martinez, was a foreseeable and well-known hazard of the industry. Bismarck's job came with free use of a hotel apartment and a passkey to every room in the complex.
He was provided a uniform, giving him the cloak of authority. He was given unfettered discretion to go anywhere he wanted within the premises, and he shouldn't have been there to begin with.
Airbnb was accused of allowing landlords to operate outside the laws governing conventional hotels. The suit states while defendant Airbnb posted complimentary and positive reviews of the resort property and its hosts, there are and were multiple reports since 2013 of guests who encountered bad experiences and recounted being victimised by personnel affiliated with the resort that defendant Airbnb sanitised from its own promotions and advertising materials.
Gordon also claiming Airbnb and the villa didn't warn guests about safety concerns from the U.S. State Department. One could argue if that's the company's responsibility or the customers.
A business owner cannot stick his head in the sand like an ostrich and pretend he doesn't know about a dangerous condition.
Airbnb mentioned nothing about being sued after my request for a statement. A spokesperson expressing heartbreak for the family.
An apology is nice, but action is more important.
Something that Carla's family spoke about, which is also listed in the lawsuit, is the belief that multiple people were likely to have been involved in disposing of Carla's body. Her friend Greg agreed and said that it seemed so unlikely that one person could have killed her, moved her, and cleaned up before the next security guard was due to take over. Who is speculated to be involved is still not known. Bismarck and Villa Lamas were ordered to pay the family just over $50,000 in civil damages. This was a Costa Rican court order, not part of the US lawsuit against Airbnb. The lawsuit did not result in a detailed public verdict, and there is no public record of Airbnb admitting liability or of a detailed court award to the family. Instead, it appears that Airbnb may have settled the claim privately, as is quite common. The listing was also removed from the platform. Carla's case continues to raise difficult questions about safety, responsibility, and investigations in countries that aren't our familiar. In fact, her disappearance came just weeks after Costa Rica's tourism board launched a new campaign for tourist safety. For most travellers, nothing ever goes wrong, until one night, in one place, it all does. In the aftermath of Carla's death, attention turned to not only the man who had killed her, but the systems around him, the property, the security, and the platform that made the stay possible, Airbnb. Carla didn't go to Costa Rica chasing danger or taking risks. She was simply doing what she loved. Travelling, exploring, marking another milestone. She should have been safe, and she should have returned home with memories to share, and loudly ringing in the next year of her life. Not as the subject of headlines and court records. For those of you that like to listen on the go, we now have our episodes in podcast form, and you can now find this via the link in our description box or by searching Truly Criminal Podcast on your podcasting platforms.